Now we're going to look at taking the short run cost curve totals that we had before and turning them into averages. If you haven't looked at that video already, make sure you go back and look, because I'm assuming you know the totals that were already in the boxes when it was totals. So remember, our fixed costs were 5. They're not going to change. They're going to be 5 no matter what. However, as we produce more and more and more, well, you have a greater and greater amount of products paying those fixed costs. So when we only have one being produced, all the fixed costs go on to that one, therefore it's going to be 5. But when we produce one more, of course, now the fixed costs 5 are spread over 2 products, so now the average fixed costs are 2.5. 5 over 3 is going to be 1 2/3. 5 over 4 is going to be 1.25. So what we notice in this is that the average fixed cost will go down and down and down, and then they get closer and closer and closer to 0, but of course we'll never quite get there, because of course you always have some positive number, 5 in this case, as the numerator. Let's go ahead and take these and put them over onto the diagram real quickly. So when the output is 1, the average fixed cost is 5, about there. When it's 2, then it's 3, or 2.5, so right about there. So again, you notice it fell very quickly from 1 to 2. It was cut basically in half. Then it goes down to 1.67. This is 1.5, so just slightly above that. Then 1.25, so in there somewhere. And then of course it gets a little bit ridiculous, but what we know is that it's never going to touch the Q-axis. So that's how we draw average fixed cost. You often don't need to actually put average fixed cost onto a diagram, but there is 1 or 2 interesting relationships to note. The average variable costs, remember, are going to be the marginal cost added together up into the given point that we're at. So obviously for the first one, the marginal cost is only 4, so the average variable cost, the total variable cost is 4. To get the average, we take the total variable cost 4 and divide it by the output 1. So 4 divided by 1 is 4. That one was easy. It'll get a little bit more tough. The total variable cost when we have 2 is 4 and 3 added together, 7. So 7 divided by 2 is 3.5. 7 and 9 divided by 3, that's 3. So far, so good. Now let's stop and make an observation. What I want to see is why the movement in average variable cost is being caused by marginal cost. Remember, the marginal cost is the change that you make. So the change I made in going from 1 to 2 was I took on $3 more of cost. Well, 3 is a lower number than 4, therefore the average falls. 2 is a lower number than 3.5, therefore the average falls. 3 is it's the same number as 3. So let's see what happens to the average here. So this is 7, 9, 12 divided by 4, and as predicted, the average is actually not going to fall. This is going to be the bottom point of this curve. The next marginal cost is greater than the average cost, so we can predict that the average will go up. So this was 12 plus 4 is 16, and 16 divided by 5 is 3.2. This was 16, that's 5 more, so 21 divided by 6. That's going to be 3.5. So this was 21. I add another 6 to get to 27. Therefore, 27 divided by 7 is going to be 3.8 more or less. So let's go ahead and put average variable cost onto our diagram. So when the average variable cost for 1, that's 4.5, so 4 is just underneath it, about there. They fall a little bit to 3.5, so in here somewhere. 3 is going to line up with 3, so right there. This is also 3 at 4, so the same spot. And then up slightly to 3.2, up a little bit more to 3.5. We saw that one before, so that should be even with that. And then up a little bit more to 3.8. So we see with average variable cost that it has our classic U shape. It's going to go down and then back up. With average total cost, remember, all we're going to take is the total variable cost, which we can't quite see, and add 5 to it, and then divide by the quantity. So the total cost, the variable cost here was 4 plus 5 is, so it's this plus this is equal to 9 divided by 1, so obviously 9. For average total cost, we can take 4 and 3 is 7 plus 5 is 12, 12 divided by 2 is 6. Now some of you might pick up on something here. 4 plus 5 was 9, 3.5 plus 2.5 is 6, and yeah, we could just add those straight across. So this is 4.67, this is 4.25, 4.2, 4.33, and that one's worth noting because this is the first time that we see average total cost increase. So we see decrease and then increase. And this is 4.51, more or less. So let's put these over onto the diagram real quickly. 9's way up there, 6 is right there, 4.67 is roughly there. Now again, you might notice something. If you look at the distance between this dot and that dot, it should be exactly the same as that space right there. And if you look at the distance between this dot and this dot, it's the exact same as that distance right there. So that relationship shows the difference between average variable cost and average total cost is the value of the average fixed cost, and we already knew that. At 4, it's 4.25, so in here somewhere. At 5, it's 4.2, so a little bit lower, but not much. And then at 6, we see it start to come up, and then up a little bit more. So we notice, just like average fixed cost is going to go down, but never quite get to 0, the gap between ATC and ABC is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller, but they're never going to quite touch. You might know from your math class that they are called asymptotes. And again, that's because there's always some distance, AFC, between the two of them. Last, let's look at how marginal cost relates to all this. And to be honest, except for AFC, marginal cost is what's causing everything else on the diagram. So marginal costs start at 4, which was this position right here. And you notice they fall, marginal cost falls to 3, and like we said before, because 3 is less than 4, average variable cost is going to fall as well. It's also part of the reason that ATC falls, but remember ATC is also falling because average fixed costs are becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. So this is going to be 3, which is here, and then down to 2, which is about there. From this point, marginal cost is going to start increasing. From the lowest point of marginal cost, we're going to see marginal cost come up, and it's going to come up to 4, which is the same as this point on ABC. At 5, it's going to be 4, which is just slightly lower than that point there. At 6, it's going to be 5, which is all the way up here. And at 7, we said it was 6, which is right there. So what we notice that as marginal cost begins to rise, once it gets to this point where it's even with ABC, ABC is going to start coming up after it. And here, because it's still below ATC continues to fall just a bit. But from this point where it crosses through ATC, after this point, ATC begins to rise. And that's the relationship that marginal cost has and causes with the rest of the curves. Any questions, leave them below.